Greetings everyone, Sternguard here, and I am back with our series of advanced guides for factions in Total War Warhammer 3. Today we're going to take a look at probably my favorite faction in terms of how it was designed, which is the Chaos Dwarves. We're going to go through our usual talking points and at the end sort of watch a game I played recently that hopefully showcases the salient points of our discussion. So let us begin. Chaos Dwarfs are basically the unholy child of Dwarfs, Empire, and Skaven. Um, they are a faction that has in its gimmicks its identity, basically. And in my research for this video, I have found out that basically every single Chaos Dwarf player plays them differently, which is one of their greatest strengths and one of the greatest things that makes them as interesting as they are, in my opinion. While most of the other factions have, I guess, one preset style and can maybe move in some sort of like a gray area around this style, Chaos Dwarfs are completely different. And they thrive off of, if you're someone that wants to learn Chaos Dwarfs or wants to defeat Chaos Dwarfs, we're going to talk a little bit about this now. They are a faction that thrives off of a couple of points in their design and sort of gives up everything else. There are a lot. It's basically like a all or nothing faction. Okay. The main things you're gonna have to think about when playing Chaos Dwarfs are these. I would say like 8 out of 10 units in the Chaos Dwarfs roster are overpriced by at least like 50 gold, maybe more. But together they amplify each other's effect way more than you would think. So they're extremely versatile, they pay probably too much for this versatility, but in the end the power of single units that I will call key units sort of shines through and gives them a place in the meta, I believe. So what are these gimmicks here? So the first one is obviously fire damage. A good amount of the Chaos Dwarf roster deals fire damage or is set up in a way to enable more fire damage to be done. Let's take a quick look. So we got 2 out of 5 lords, 2 out of 5 heroes, 3 infantry units, 2 range units, a skirmish unit, several monsters, and basically almost all of the artillery does fire damage. So we also have some spell that increase the amount of fire damage that is done. Now this is more of an incidental thing. I don't think that building for fire damage efficiency is a particularly good strat from the grounds up, but it's something that you have to keep in mind while building a list anyway, because eventually those percentage points will add up, and there are some specific combos, especially with the Bale Taurus, that require a bit of careful microing so that you can first set up the fire weakness, then the fire damage comes, and then perhaps you intercept a healing spell. So this is the first point. The second point is the interplay between the Laborer Corps and the actual Chaos Dwarfs units. So Chaos Dwarfs units, the actual Chaos Dwarfs, have an ability called Contempt, which means that they do not suffer the leadership penalty of friendly units with the Malign Authority keyword, which are mostly these two, but this also applies to the other hobgoblins, if they route around them. But the units with Malign Authority do benefit from having Contempt units around, which is +8 leadership. So that means that a proper spacing of Chaos Dwarfs and Laborer units, and to a lesser extent Hobgoblins units, will serve you much better than just haphazard positioning. The second thing we want to talk about is what I call the concept of key units, which is something we will see a lot more in the roster review and in the game analysis. More than most other races, this is something that I think comes from the Skaven side of the Chaos Dwarfs, you know. Chaos Dwarfs rely on few key pieces to win, not just to win the game, because that's relatively common, but the entire game plan and the sort of the state of the game at any point when you are facing Chaos Dwarfs and when you are playing Chaos Dwarfs can be judged by what is the status of these 4 or 5 key units now in the battlefield. Are they online? Are they compromised? Are they doing their job? Are they even on the field? And just by answering this question, you can pretty much at a glance understand what is going on in any battle. Now, what are these units? These units are oftentimes your big wizard lords, so the Sorcerer Prophet, Drazoath, and Astrogoth. They are specifically the Blazing Beards. We will talk about this later. And they are your blunderbusses and your fireglaves. And they are your artillery and trains. So the concept of key unit is even deeper here than any other race, because for example, like Dwarves has key units, but they can win without those key units. It's going to be harder, but a game plan can be enacted if, I don't know, your artillery gets sniped. You know, Chaos Dwarfs don't really have this. Chaos Dwarfs have, hopefully, if the list is constructed well, more of these units in the army. But if they are cut out of the army, the game is over. So they are completely reliant on these units. They are the units that are the least overpriced, coincidentally, and they are the ones around which your whole army is based around. Now, this is also their greatest strength, but also their greatest weakness, because obviously the enemy, if he's knowledgeable, he will know that he needs to expect some key units within your army, so we will prepare. There is, however, some strength in, expecting an over-preparation from your opponent's side. So, for example, I have played multiple high-level tournaments in which, mass trains was expected, and I brought no trains, but I brought a gunline build with 3 blunderbusses and 2 fireglaves. That can really just almost win you the game before the match has started. Preparing for one key unit is easy, but preparing for all of them is oftentimes not so easy. So this is the other key point. And the third point that I want to stress out before we look at the roster is don't fall into the trap of playing Chaos Dwarfs like Dwarves with cavalry. This isn't the same thing at all. You have the option of playing Chaos Dwarfs like Dwarves in some matchups, in some maps, but that must be sort of like a conscious, deliberate choice that is adapted at the correct time. If you do this blindly, you will lose a lot more. For a variety of reasons. Chaos Dwarfs infantry is a lot more pricey, so you cannot go as wide as Dwarves. Chaos Dwarfs mobility isn't really that much better than Dwarves, if you think about it. You have a pretty good heavy cav, but you're not going to be zipping around points that well. And the magic resist is gone, substituted by a variable amount of fire resistance that is almost worthless in low tier infantry, but quite good into high tier infantry and heroes, that they get to, like, I think 30%, 35% on heroes and lords, which is useful but not not that useful, and the Burning Head will still do damage to all your naked hobgoblins and goblins units. And also, if you remember from the dwarf video, and I'm sure you do because you are a smart, handsome man who watches all of my videos, independent shooting. Chaos Dwarfs do not have good, solid, cheap, independent shooting. The Chaos Dwarf shooting, which is arguably a lot better than Dwarves, depending on the circumstance, requires a lot more support and requires a lot more correct positioning. So don't go around like playing, oh, I want to build like a dwarf army in Chaos Dwarfs, but I'm going to throw 4 hobgoblins like this, and then I want my sort of quarrelers behind them, and then like this looks decent, but it works only in specific matchups against low armor factions, against factions that perhaps are weak to fire, against factions that swarm you. And if you sort of keep on this reasoning, the acceptable answer to when can I play Chaos Dwarfs like dwarves sort of shrinks and shrinks and shrinks. You can play Chaos Dwarfs like dwarves that are more offensively slanted and require more big plays to win. They require more micro and more quick decisions, slightly less game plan. Simply because the big part of how am I going to win the match is already covered here, which is the key units. Okay, so let's look at the roster review. We begin with the lords. The Overseer is one of my picks for the worst lord in the game. It is not cheap enough to be considered cheap. It is not a particularly good fighter. It is not even particularly tanky, like the dwarf lord. It's something that... Sorry, I have to drink. I'm getting old. I believe I have found exactly one use for, which is... Sorry, 1.5. In that is stats as a fighter with the Lamassu mount at 1400 are sensibly better than the sort of standard Lamassu, as you can see. But even then, the use cases of wanting a Lamassu Lord rather than a Lamassu, which is a niche unit in the first place, it's they're just really small. So I would advise you to ignore this lord for the most part, except if you want to troll your opponent with Black Gem of Nar. If you know your opponent is doing like a sniping build, and they don't read unit cards for some reason, and you're playing versus Wood Elves and he has like Prey of Anathrema on your lord, double Arrows of Cornus on your lord, you can pop the Black Gem of Nar, which makes him invulnerable for a bit, and laugh before losing the game because you brought an Overseer. But let's not think about this. It's just a relatively cheap, competent fighter. But we have better in this roster. What do I mean? We have Zaytan in this roster. Zaytan is a better Overseer. He has essentially like the same stats defensive wise, but is a bit more offensive. Or rather, he has the same amount of defense but more offense. But his greatest strength comes in his items, especially the Sadistic Snare, which is a 2-use, very slow range but very powerful net, which enables you to do some really nifty sniping builds or locking down a particularly troublesome unit from your opponent's side. Now you will need to be very close to it, but locking a unit down for 30 seconds and in many cases like halving or more its melee defense will make almost any unit in the game very easy prey if you can coordinate your efforts accordingly. Because we have this sort of low range powerful ability, now this is the case in which we might want the Lamassu, because it means that we have a flyer that brings us some sort of incidental utility that allows Zaytan to move quicker on the battlefield. And you know, he's a source of terror and some other stuff, which is one other thing I wanted to mention in the Chaos Dwarfs versus Dwarves differentiation. You have terror now. Abuse the terror. That being said, Zaytan isn't exactly the meta choice either. So you want to bring Zaytan if and only if you have a specific use case for the sadistic snare. Now let's go into the heavy hitters of the Chaos Dwarfs army, the Sorcerer Lords. Now the Sorcerer Prophet is a very powerful but very overrated lord in my opinion. The Chaos Dwarf Sorcerer Lord is our sorcerer and our lord, which means you don't have to take a Demosmith sorcerer if you take him, which is an added value. Now they also have access to quite powerful lores of magic in death, fire, and metal, and a kind of lore of magic, which is the lore of a shoot, which I will talk a little bit later. So they are spellcasters, which have two very, very powerful things going for them, which are the Chalice of Blood and Darkness and the Bale Taurus Mount. Now the Bale Taurus Mount gives your Sorcerer Lord, which is already two very good things that you want to have together, a very powerful flying mount, but it also gives you extreme mobility and 4,000 more HP. So you now have a very powerful caster lord duelist, which enables itself because both sorcerer prophets and demon smiths imbue fire weakness with their range attacks, but deal fire damage with their melee attacks. Okay, so if you're really good and you have some micro to spare, you can make sure to shoot your opponent with your fire gun and then charge with your bolt for maximum damage. The Chalice of Blood and Darkness is a very powerful heal which triggers when an opponent anywhere on the map casts a spell. And this is the main sort of survivability enhancer that this lord has. However, we are getting, so for example, if we do something like this, which is a typical setup I like to run, we are getting quite expensive obviously, but this lord can win you the game if you use it properly. Obviously there are a couple of things you wanna watch out for. The first is the Vial of a Shoot, which is another item that gives insane armor and fire weakness debuff, but it's only a one-time use. Only bring it, a bit like Zaytan, if you have a very specific sniping attempt, either build or it is necessary for your build. An example is a bit of time ago I had a build versus Warriors of Chaos that required, I had no way to reliably kill the Hell Cannon. So I knew that I had to snipe it with the Sorcerer Lord, so I would fly in, shoot it with the pistol, apply Vial of a Shoot, do the Bull Taurus Breath, and then cast a spell on the cannon, which would guarantee its one shot. Other than that, it's way too expensive, so don't auto-take it. And the last thing, which is the thing that nobody thinks about because complaining is easier than understanding, is that when you have a Bale Taurus, your armor drops significantly. Okay? You go from 120 to 70 armor, and your melee defense drops significantly. You go to 40 melee defense. You do have a lot of hit points, but you have kinda crappy armor and kinda crappy melee defense for an entity this crucial to the game plan of Chaos Dwarfs. So you are very, very, very susceptible to snipe. You do need to be careful and not get your lord killed, or it might lose you even games that are already won. This is the first of the key units we want to highlight in this discussion. A little bit of a parenthesis on Lore of a Shoot. Lore of a Shoot is supposed to be like a direct damage and debuff centric lore, In practice, it's probably the worst lore of the Chaos Dwarves, and I would, I guess, recommend only a couple things here. The first one is Burning Wrath with Killing Fire, which is the passive of the lore, which gives a small AoE of like a damage over time effect around the caster. This combo, especially with the overcasted Burning Wrath, makes your caster a pretty good chaff clearing spellcaster. However, the use cases where you want this and not something like Burning Head are really, really small. So if you want Astrogoth but you want a chaff clear, do this. The other spell I really love here is the Flames of Asgore, which is one of the best nuke spells in the game. There are very few things that will survive a Flame of Asgore, even undercasted really. So against big single entities, against monsters infantry, monsters cavalry, Cavlord, everything like that. However, it does take a long time to cast, so don't really cast it willy-nilly. Drazwath. Drazwath is a sorcerer lord with a couple of upsides and a lot of downsides. So I do not recommend him in general so far. I believe he deserves a couple of key buffs. But let's look at him objectively. He is a sorcerer lord. Let's put him on a Bale Taurus, his own Bale Taurus, with sort of naked, but only with spells. He is more expensive than a sorcerer lord, with substantially better combat stats, with a better fighter, worse caster, because 9 out of 10 you don't really want the lore of a shoot. But he does have some nifty items. Dark Renown gives your dwarf units around him plus 8 melee attack, and melee attack is generally quite good for dwarf units, because even here in Chaos Dwarfs land, you know, our units are more famed for their melee defense than melee attack. So upgrading it is very beneficial. And also, all of these 3 items are very good. Damage reflection, damage resistance in melee, excellent. Spell mastery when I kill stuff on a very killy lord, excellent. Graven Scepter, I do more melee attack, more damage, I get magic damage, excellent. Wow, what an amazing lord. Oh wait, it doesn't heal like the other lord. What is this? Oh wait, half of my funds are gone because I need to put them on my lord, which dies even faster than the regular lord, because it can't heal even with its like plus 6 melee defense. Wow, this is the main sort of problem with Drazwath. It's not a bad lord, but it is objectively worse than the Sorcerer Prophet in basically every real scenario that will happen in a game. Astrogoth. Astrogoth is a mixed caster that cannot take a mount of fire and shoot spells. So quite good. He somehow managed to get like the worst spells of both lores, but let's not think about that. He still gets some good spells. He gets both passives, and he gets a lot of interesting items. He's a pretty good fighter, pretty tough, he's a caster, and all of his items are good for at least some purpose. My preferred loadout is having him with as few spells as possible. So for example, Flamestorm, the Kindle Flame passive for our incidental fire synergy, also with itself, and Stone Mantle, which is for someone who basically always gets his lords killed, is a godsend. Oh, see, I will still have him killed, don't worry about it, but it will take a lot longer. This gives him physical resistance as he gets more wounded. The fact that he is a caster and on foot means he's generally more survivable than your big flashy chaos sorcerer lord wizard's prophet thingy, but he will be less mobile. I really like Astrogoth. Use him if you want to go a little bit wider, or if you are afraid of getting your lord sniped. Having free magic damage also helps. The heroes are probably the biggest disappointment of the Chaos Dwarfs roster. The Overseer is just a bad unit. It has a really interesting item that gives him regeneration in melee, but he doesn't want to be in melee with these stats. He will kill stuff really slow. He's too expensive for mediocre stats all around, except for good armor. He basically costs around like a blunderbuss for like having a very slow pinging unit on a big single entity, which is its best case scenario. Like the best case scenario is that you bring 2 castellans naked and they are allowed to snipe like a mammoth, for example, for the whole game unopposed, and even then they will likely barely get their value back. So I would, as it stands right now in like March 2025, advise any player who wants to improve at Chaos Dwarfs to forget about this unit for now. Even if they look really cool, I love them, but they're bad. Gordas is a weird character. He's very expensive, and his place on the roster is somewhat foggy in my eye because you don't really have the way to support him correctly. What he does do, which I like, is that he is a very good wizard hunter because he's fast. He has very good melee defense for some reason. And he has enough weapon strength to meaningfully chunk away at low armor, low HP units, which is usually wizards. So the way I like to run him is in a matchup where I have some spare money and there is an enemy wizard that is often problematic. The Taur'ruk is an anti-large, large fighter with a really bad case of, oh, we are in the Chaos Dwarf roster, so everything must be really stupidly expensive. The like blunt statement of fact is that he is way too expensive for what he does, and you don't really need a fighter at this price with these mediocre stats. I would advise you ignore him, except if you love him, like in the way he looks and its lore, which is cool. In that case, naked with perhaps heroic killing blow can make him a pretty good. I wouldn't call him like a duelist of single entities because he will lose to most single entities because he has like no HP and no defensive stats. But he's extremely good at damaging single entities that are attacking something else. You can understand how for almost 300 gold it's a pretty small use case scenario though. The Demonsmith Sorcerer is a weaker version of the Sorcerer Prophet, including the mount choices, including the spirit, the magic lores, but with 2 very different points. First, he doesn't get the Chalice of Blood and Darkness, which is probably the best thing about the Sorcerer Prophet Lord. And 2, he does get Reforge, which is essentially a heal to our mechanical units, which can be used. It's not awful, but it is a very slow and a very unimpressive heal. So my recommendation is bring him as a consequence of needing Zaytan, right? Because you do need to bring a magic lord, otherwise you are gimping yourself a wizard character, otherwise you are gimping yourself way too much. So don't start off a match with saying, oh, I need a Demonsmith Sorcerer. Only get to this conclusion if Zaytan is your lord of choice. Because then, yeah, I need magic, and then incidentally you can bring other stuff like Reforge if you have a lot of trains and stuff like that. Also, like on a big Bale Tauros mount, it's still gonna be a big bruiser, but he will be very fragile. The infantry. The infantry of Chaos Dwarfs serves a very similar purpose to the regular Dwarf roster, but it is more offensively slanted. We start with the Laborer units, which are predictably among the worst units in the game. They will break immediately, even if they are surrounded by units that can give them their leadership buff. Orc Laborers have a little bit of use cases against heavy armor, because they are not terrible fighters if you add the leadership to them, and they will still like trade somewhat evenly versus stuff like dwarf warriors or miners or empire spearmen, stuff like that. But the goblins are they are literally there to die. Okay, they are there to absorb charges from cavalry, they are there to absorb arrows from archers, they are there to plug holes in your formation and die. That's all, basically. They are often used, both of these units, even though I am starting to prefer Orc Laborers, because the roster is often awkwardly priced. So you will have your core army done, and you will have like 450 gold left, which means no actual good unit in the roster. So you might as well, in that case, like take 3 Goblin Laborers, have them eat a cavalry charge from Empire Knight while you kill the knights in some other way, and they serve their purpose. Hobgoblin Cutthroats and Hobgoblin Sneaky Gates are sort of the tier above of units, but they do start serving somewhat specialized purposes. Hobgoblin Cutthroats they're still bad, they're not a good unit, but they are very good with their Backstabber ability, which means that essentially, like, they are very good at the beginning of a fight when they're fresh, and they get really poor really quickly. Okay, use them against factions that really don't care if you are armored or not, and you just want to go as wide as possible. They are a kinda bad infantry unit that does its job of holding for a little bit if it has a Chaos Dwarf around them. That's basically it. Sneaky Gates, on the other hand, I love these guys, even if they could probably use a little bit of a buff as well. They are Vanguard units that have stock, have precursor ammo, which means they will shoot on the move while they get to a point, and they have a pretty substantial anti-infantry bonus with poison, which means they are extremely good at even punching up into low to mid armored infantry units, which means that often what they can do is either support a fight that is already ongoing by coming in on the flanks, or capping a faraway point where that your opponent thinks it's safe because he has like a random man-at-arms there, or a skink, or I don't know, a swordsman unit. These units will kill them quickly and efficiently. They are very fragile though. I often recommend at least 1 or 2 in most armies. They also are, quick tip, very good at protecting you from infantry with stock. So they are, because the enemy stock units will get into range of them, and they will uptrade into a lot of stock stuff like the Ashen Triads and stuff like that. Now we move into the meat of the Chaos Dwarfs infantry regiment, which is their heavy infantry. We can draw somewhat similar conclusion to what we have spoken of in the Dwarves video, but there are some key differences. Dwarf units do pay a bit more for their stats than dwarves, so you end up with a less cost-efficient spread of stats for the money that you pay, but unit per unit, Chaos Dwarfs units are better than Dwarves. This means that even the sort of basic Chaos Dwarf Warrior is actually comparable to something like a mid to high tier unit of another army. So it's more comparable to an armored Kossar than a Kossar, for example. So these are relatively stalwart line-holding infantry, while the Chaos Dwarf Great Weapon unit is a more offensively slanted unit, but so far I would say the shield is almost always the best choice. The other key unit we want to talk about is the Blazing Beards of Basharak. Now, why do I say that these are one of the key units? I think you should bring them basically in every single matchup because they are the cheapest unit that does two very important things here, which is it is a very good line holder with its defensive stats, and it is a pretty strong chaff clearing tool. So it does two very good things because this unit has two charges of blasting charges that are decently powerful even into like mid armored units. And with Frenzy, we had a little bit more punch and resistant to to terror basically. So this is a premium elite infantry unit that comes as a sub 1000 price point with magic attacks, fire attacks as well. So this is something that I would argue most factions would love to have. You want this in your army. It will do a lot of things well. We move up a tier with the Infernal Guard. The Infernal Guard are really cool looking units, but pay way too much for their cost. They are an upgrade over your Chaos Dwarf Warrior, but they cost way too much for their stats. They are decent, but they aren't great, so you need a specific purpose to use them. So you can't just plop them into an army and expect good performance. You will end up most of the time with a subpar army this way. We will talk about one of these use cases in the video, in the sort of the game analysis later. So hopefully we will elaborate a bit. Same deal for the Great Weapon Infantry. The Ironsworn are not a key unit, but they're very close to a key unit. They are my favorite unit in the roster, or second favorite unit in the roster. They are better Iron Breakers with magic attacks. So they are, but they are better than Iron Breakers, especially in the biggest weakness of Iron Breakers, which is the melee attack. So they are Iron Breakers that can actually deal damage, which is a massive upgrade to Iron Breakers, which were already a pretty good unit. They weren't bad. So what we do have is an Iron Breaker that deals more damage with its blasting charges. It deals more damage with its regular melee attacks, which deals both magic and fire damage, and also have like generally better stats overall. So this is one of the ultimate line holders in the game. Sadly, it does suffer from the fact that it's quite expensive and vulnerable to artillery and spells, but if you are facing a faction which you know you can shut down these two aspects, Ironsworn will demolish almost every opposition. Their Regiment of Renown, the Immortals, is a chaff blender unit, which is not something that you want. It's too expensive to lose two extremely good aspects of the original Ironsworn units, which are the shield, with, I just noticed, 14 melee defense, which is massive. And you also lose the blasting charges. So they are good units in all like by all expectations. It's just that your roster leans more heavily toward wanting an anchor unit than a very slow anvil, right? I completely said that wrong. An anvil unit rather than a very slow hammer. That's what I meant to say. So I take them into Khorne, into Nurgle maybe, into Vampire Counts if you want to feel a bit Smexy or like into Norska, but other than that, you don't really need them. Iron Sworn are just better. Missile infantry. Now we are starting to get into the more key part of the roster, a bit like dwarves. Hobgoblin archers, after their changes, are a very respectable range units. These guys are one of the cheapest ways to inflict fire damage onto people. Their new models means that as long as they are relatively healthy, they will do a pretty good amount of damage. But they are very fragile and their leadership is poor, so they need a lot of babysitting. Probably they are amongst the weakest in terms of holding power of range units in the game. So you need to keep them protected, but if you do keep them protected, the enemy low armored units will really suffer. They can also win a lot of range duels against pound for pound better units simply by weight of numbers. Like, you can bring a lot of these guys, and if you can protect them, the fire damage will add up a lot with Kindle Flame and stuff. Blunderbusses and Fireglaves are two of the other key units of the roster. Blunderbusses are, as the name says, a short-range, high-power shotgun unit, basically, which is good at either slow pushing into your opponent or defending your backline. You have kind of low armor, but silver shields, which means they are somewhat resilient to arrow fire, and you can also use them to push slowly. If you have like a hobgoblin, like a laborer front line, just kill your laborers. Don't quote me on that. I mean, don't take that out of the context. But you can just kill like goblin laborers if you need to take an important volley onto stuff. These things will melt most stuff in the game. Okay. But they are short range, so you will need to push up with them. Fireglaves are the other favorite unit of mine in the roster. They are essentially high armor handguns, which deals fire damage, and have AP and anti-large into melee combat, so they can defend themselves quite well against low power dives, even though you don't really want them being dived by anything. Like, you do want these guys to be shooting, because if they do shoot, they deal a lot of damage, but do protect them from artillery and spells. Low AP stuff, you don't care about that. You have 100 armor, quite a bit of HP, and they will counter fire and kill lots of stuff. Having an unobstructed and free Fireglaive will win you a good percentage of Chaos Force games. The Grand Guard is the ROR for the blunderbusses. At the same price of Fireglaves, it's way too expensive, because most of what it gains is just more damage than a unit that does an insane amount of damage already, and a bit of armor, but you lose the shield, which is a massive thing. So use them only if there is like a really big single entity that you want to kill, for example versus Lizardman, which is what I will do later. And even then, like, the blunderbuss will do its job 90% of the time, and the other 10% of the time the Fireglaive will do its job better, because it has more range, it has fire damage, it has a good amount of AP as well, it is a more independent unit. It doesn't have the same burst, but in a long game the Fireglaive will do better. Cavalry and chariots. Hobgoblins, Wolf Raiders, Wolf Raider bows, and the Hoglakan's boys. We will talk about them together. They are quite speedy, quite low leadership, skirmish core of your army. There's not much to say about these guys other than the fact that you have to be really careful. They will rout really easily. They do have a pretty interesting passive, which is Cowardly Despoilers, which means they are perfect for flanking or sort of ensuring a unit is routed off the battlefield. If you can, use these units only to protect your flanks and then to rear charge stuff. Another thing is that Hoglakans are quite good in melee, but they do have a bow, and they impart what is it? They impart fire weakness. I don't remember where it says on the thingy, but they do impart fire weakness. So another synergy with the fire stuff. So like this is a pretty reliable skirmish core that will do surprisingly well if you have the micro to keep them out of danger. Bull centaurs are the heavy cav core of the Chaos Dwarves. They kind of are, I would say, the the they are an offensively slanted heavy cav core, so you need a specific purpose for them, as they are very expensive. But all of the variants provide something useful. Infantry blending capabilities, anti-cav and anti-large, a bit of a generalist take on anything. They are very expensive, they are very vulnerable, but they do pack a lot of damage. They also cause fear, which is very important. The ROR has a ranged attack, which isn't that great, but it does have a double, I guess, like a double. It double dips into resistance basically. So it has both physical and missile resistance, which means most low-powered range attacks will just fall off of it, right? Will fall off of them. Sorry. The relatively low speed compared to other cav does mean that you usually want them to be fulfilling a more of a defensive role rather than an offensive one. Like, they are there to kill their specific target, so like infantry or cav that comes into you rather than go hunting this stuff down. There are exceptions, of course, but do keep that in mind. The one that is more commonly seen, I would argue, because it is more needed in the roster, is the great weapon one. If you don't know what to bring, just start like this. Except against dwarves, this will do fine, basically everywhere. Monsters and beasts. This is a pretty interesting category. The three flyers, the three monsters flyers of the Chaos Dwarves are in ascending order of quality, the same as their price. So the Great Taurus is just flat out bad. I would suggest you just don't use it because it's too easy to kill. It is a big flying single entity that just sacrifices way too much defenses for a mediocre damage output. And yeah, it is terror, but we don't need that. We have other ways to inflict terror, such as the Lamasu. The Lamasu is a more defensively slanted Great Taurus, but it is quite slow. It does have 2 debuff spells bound to it, and it does have a small, I think way too small, silence around it, so it does disrupt casters, which can be very nichely, is that a word? Whatever, useful in some niches. But as a fight, like its low offensive output with its low speed and the very small area of its effect does make it not like an auto pick, but something that you really need to be sure you want it in the matchup. And you want it, you know, if you're bringing Zaytan, so you might as well just bring Zaytan with the Lamasu, or if you need another lord and you must keep something silenced the whole game. The Bale Taurus is where it's at. This is a legitimately powerful fighter with good mobility, causes terror, and has a pretty good like flaming breath attack, which has kind of bad accuracy, but it does some good damage when it hits. It is very expensive though, and its leadership is fickle, but it does have the punch to justify its cost. Kadai Fireborn are a monstrous infantry unit that specializes in dealing magical damage and anti-infantry damage. So they are somewhat like your Minotaurs light, but they are very good versus stuff with physical resistance. They have a pretty interesting ability, which is basically like they cost terror and they have demonic instability, but they don't lose models until they get to what is it? Let me see. I don't remember, but basically, okay, there we go. Um, as long as they have like more than a third of their health, they will be fully effective because of all of their models. And at their price, they are surprisingly good anti-infantry piece, to the point where they kind of overlap with the bull centaur renders because they do the same thing, but the 200 less the Kadai does come into focus quite often, so you might want to use Kadai instead of dual axis renders sometimes, especially in factions where the fire damage stacking is important. I really like Kadai. I sadly don't like this Kadai. The Kadai Destroyer is it the worst big centerpiece single entity in the game? I don't know if this one or the core single entity monster is worse, but this is just a worthless unit. It doesn't do anything. It's expensive. It dies to arrows because it doesn't have substantial defenses. It has terrible animations that, like, it knocks down 20 units but it deals damage to 2. It's super slow. It doesn't synergize with the roster. Just forget about this until it gets like massive buffs. Sadly, this is not something that will ever serve you well unless you are massively outscaling your opponent on the right map. Artillery wise, we have 1, 2, 3 variants of, I guess, rocket or like standard artillery. The magma cannon is an anti-infantry / anti-cavalry mid-range cannon, which has a very powerful effect on leadership because it deals its initial damage, causes its damage, the attack from artillery debuff, the burnt effect, so an additional -8 leadership, and it leaves a vortex so that the damage and the effect lingers. But it does have middling range. So what this means is that this is an excellent infantry clearer with pretty good potential versus cav. Like if it hits them head on, it can do surprisingly good damage. But its accuracy isn't amazing. We then move on into the Hell Cannons, which I think the sort of damnation is just a straight upgrade, so you should take it all rather than its standard variant, because it has more ammo and it deals more damage. But what these two are very powerful generalist artillery. They can do whatever you want, basically. They deal good damage versus infantry, good damage versus single entities. They can shoot into a bit more of an arc than the magma cannon. The magma cannon requires better line of sight. But the Hell Cannons are crude artillery, while the rest of the artillery here is a single entity. So people can kill the actual crew, while here they have to route the whole RTPs. So they are a bit more, dangerous to use. The Deshik rocket launcher is essentially a rocket that is primarily used versus monsters or big stuff because it has two fire modes: a single shot that deals huge damage versus single entities, and basically like a cluster munition that does good damage versus infantry. However, the cluster munition can be easily dodged, so I would argue that if you want to specifically kill big stuff, you want the rocket launcher. If you want to and incidentally, you can then kill some infantry. If you want to kill cav and infantry, you want to bring the magma cannon. If you're not sure, you can either skew your build a lot or just bring the Soul of Damnation, which does have the increased range, so these two units have bigger range than the magma cannon. I will say a couple of things. Both of the artillery pieces here of the Chaos Dwarfs have very low leadership, so they are very easy to rout if they take a lot of alpha strike damage. And all of these three can shoot in an arc, while the magma cannon does not. So speaking of maps, if you can find like a rock to hide behind, even the hell cannon, but especially the death streak, can benefit a lot, because something we have to talk about is that, weirdly enough, Chaos Dwarfs pound for pound will lose all artillery duels in the game. So you need some strategy to win those fights, and the most common one is to just hide your pieces behind the rock, because we have the advantage of indirect fires while most cannons just can't. Okay. Then we talk about trains, and I guess the Dreadquake. The Dreadquake is like a big super weapon mortar which kills everything if it hits, but it will never hit. It is currently bugged, so its performance can't really be judged correctly. It can be attached to a train, but sadly, before giving it like an actual, verdict on how good it is, I would like it to be fully patched out. I will say I think it is somewhat undervalued by the community. I think it legitimately has some uses into like a couple of matchups, like Bretonia, for reasons that trains themselves are very good. The point is, it's obviously really, really expensive. Now, what do we mean by this? I mean that trains are the other key unit of the Chaos Dwarfs roster. These are unbreakable single entities, chariots that can shoot. Two of them. This one can't. They require a lot of micro to be used correctly, but they are essentially like, think of them as a mix between tanks and chariots. They are used to infantry clear for the most part, but they can do some damage versus all targets. They are essentially there to mow down the stuff that either is flanking you or has crashed into your shield wall. And they are probably the best, the one thing that is keeping the Chaos Dwarfs alive right now, because they are such a powerhouse that is hard to catch, since they move at quite the speed, especially if you use more power on them. They are hard to catch, which means that the most reliable way to deal with them is shooting. But your whole army can be I guess, tailored to remove threats to trains, and then the trains run rampant. They do require a lot of micro, though. They also have a very interesting upgrade called Hellbound, which I often advise you take, because it gives them perfect vigor, magical attacks, and phase resist. So it augments their performance quite a bit for just 150. Gives them tankiness as well. Let's talk about the differences of the various trains. The Skullcracker is the worst of the three. It costs more than the Iron Demon while having very comparable stats and no shooting attack. The one thing it does more and better is it has more charge bonus. Well, not more charge bonus, it has more like weapon strength, so in its charge it does more damage, especially versus cavalry. In all other situations, the Iron Demons and the ROR are better because they have a shooting attack, comparable melee stats, and the two trains, the two Iron Demons do like suppressed, so less speed, and suppressed, and does the burnt effect. I don't remember. Yes, it also has burnt effect, the ROR, and it has a massive flamethrower attack. So these two units are insane. They wear out whole like infantry clusters in like seconds, especially the ROR. Always take it with the Hellbound, and the shooting attack will help offset one of the weaknesses of trains, which is they often get stuck. People say that they never get stuck. They're wrong. They've never played this game at a high level, or they just don't know what they're talking about. I'm sorry, I'm kind of a stickler for this kind of stuff. Just don't make stuff up. They do get stuck a lot, especially if they can't turn properly. But the shooting attack of the trains does help because it often removes what is keeping the stack, meaning an enemy unit. So I would advise you to take the Iron Demons 99% of the time in your Chaos Dwarfs build, either in reserve or in the main army. This doesn't really matter that much. I prefer them in reserve personally because if they are in reserve, you have more control into exactly where they come into the fight. Because as we have said before, the game plan of your opponent is going to be how do I remove the key units that allow the Chaos Dwarfs to win. If I get to decide when these units appear, then it's better for me. Because I can make sure that there are no threats to them, and then I can deploy them. And their power level is so high that they can make a big impact very quickly. So the fact that they come in later into the match when stuff is stabilized doesn't really matter that much. Let's talk a little bit about maps. As maps go, there are a couple of things you want to think about when you're playing Chaos Dwarfs. You want, at the same time, as much as the the whole video has been about this, map choices, as much as the roster, are basically like a whole mess of contradictions. You want maps where there is excellent line of fire for your guns, but enough cover to hide your artillery. You want maps that aren't too short because you might get rushed, but you don't want them too long because your ability to project your force into faraway points is limited to hobgoblins and trains. So you might prefer like big wide maps rather than big long maps. Okay? You definitely do not want maps with lots of trees into them. Let's think, for example, I like Bleak Spy Labor Camp is a big map, but it is wider than longer, and it doesn't have big problems with the line of sight, so I like it. For Chaos Dwarfs, I like Crystal Lake, same reasoning. It's a big map, but it has all of its cover into the spawn, like these two big rocks. I can hide my Destrix here, and they are safer from the enemy artillery while they can kill stuff on the points. While the big open stuff in the middle allows my shooting to reign supreme. Eastern Isle Colony is also good. It forces your opponent into funnel points that you can shoot at them from, and your artillery can take some cover from the enemy as long as you use the big shot blocker in the middle. Halls of Karak Doom, same thing. I do not like, for example, Otsuchi Castle, or Road to Vol's Anvil, too many shot blockers. Otsuchi Castle, too big, too many slight problems with line of sight. No way to actually consolidate your forces. I do like Road to Talabheim, for example, because it means that my artillery can be safer in an artillery duel. Let's look at the replay and see if what I said is complete crap or it does have some valid points. So this is one of the matches that I have played with a clanmate who is a really good Lizardman player. You will see him in the channel soon, Lord Shaftesbury. We were trying to figure out the Chaos Dwarfs versus Lizardman matchup, which I think is really good for Lizardmen. And we started the practice session, and I was losing constantly. I just couldn't get a win. And after a while, I adapted and adapted and adapted, and eventually I found a way to leverage my power units correctly into basically what is like a preconception of most players that will go versus Chaos Dwarfs, which is anticipating your plays because your power units have a limited, like there's a limited spectrum of what you're gonna bring. Okay? So let's think about this. My opponent, Shaftesbury, is a really good Lizardman player. Is going to be prepared for my power units, or at least for some power units. So what are my power units? They're going to be my big flying lords, they're going to be my trains, they're going to be my powerful shooting. So his army is a lot of powerful AP infantry for my very own infantry, a lot of skin skirmishers because lizardmen players have one brain cell, and something for my power units. A wizard lord with Lord of High, which has, I believe, Tempest. There we go, to deal with my flyers. So one power unit countered, and Stegodons to deal with my artillery and my trains. I forgot about artillery. That's what I meant it before. You know it. The artillery is also a power unit. So if he removes my power units with his own power units, I basically immediately lose the game, even if the rest of the game is going into my favor. As a counter, I guess, I developed this for this specific match, which isn't necessarily the best build, but it's just something that I figured might work. My power units in the beginning are one magma cannon because I need to quickly remove all of this armor piercing for my infantry. My sorcerer lord is on foot, so it's not that much of an investment as a power unit, right? Is a sorcerer of metal, is on foot, so it's cheaper. Is a power unit in the sense that it's still like a leadership boost and all that, but it's not, you know, so much of a cost into it. The blazing beards, same reasoning that we talked about before, and 2 units on fire glaives because they look cool as shit, and also they will be able to shoot every big stuff that the lizardman player brings out, so cavalry, eventual shredder, or croxigors, stuff like that. Let's see what happens. Now, I do make a couple of mistakes in this game, but that's the point of this series. You want to see how mistakes happen, why they happen, what can be done to avoid them in the future as well. So, also, this game is a perfectly good example of how a good player such as Shaftesbury will take advantage of your mistakes and weaknesses, but you can still claw back if you have massive genitalia like I do. Okay, so let's begin. While we watch the replay, I will also do this, try to basically always keep in mind the power unit concept I have spoken of. Always think about where are your power units, are they safe, what are they doing, are they being compromised, and if they are, I need to switch my entire attention into making sure that these units go back to being safe and doing what they're supposed to be doing. Once tech I wanted to try out was the Lamassu, because the Slan is such a powerhouse that I figured that it's having its silence could be really good for me. It ended up being really bad, and Shaftesbury manages to quite effectively remove it from play, and that puts me in a back foot immediately because it's very costly, and I just basically wasted it away. So there's a lot of posturing, a lot of getting into position. I have seen this flank coming. So I tried, this is what I meant to say, like, I overextend a bit, I should have been tighter into my formation, but having seen this, I purposefully wait a little bit before correcting my mistake, which might sound counterintuitive, but this is a bigger mistake my opponent is doing, which is basically I let him think he's about to do a big flank, but I have already set up to basically move these 3 units back, so that from like a big C, my formation becomes like a U, okay? So where are my power units? I just got one of them spelled because I'm not that great. Blazing Beards have done their job, they're fine, they're safe. Lord is fine, safe. Other Fireglaive is doing its job, killing stuff. Playing Magma Cannon, doing its job, killing stuff. Here I make a mistake, I get my Lamassu tempested, I guess, and it will get essentially almost routed off immediately. This is a big loss I do, it's a big mistake, you can see in the value. But my infantry core is secure, my power units aside from the Lamassu are secure, so I still have a fighting chance. The big flank continues as you can see, but the important thing you have to think about is always the power units. I don't care about all of this stuff. All of this stuff is just They might as well all be laborers. I don't care about this, 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 this. None of this matters. All I care about this, 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 and this. And another power unit which has entered the game, which, as we've said before, could still be like a blunderbuss or something. The Granite Guard. Now, where are my power units? One of my power units is currently being threatened, but I anticipated this, and you can see I divert most of my attention to making sure that this flank doesn't do what it's supposed to be doing. I summon another power unit to cover its flank. I summoned a quick response unit to cover its flank. I switched the targeting of the magma cannon to cover one of the units that's about to threaten my Infernal Guard, while the Infernal Guard I know can win the duel with the Razor Dawn. So I have diverted 4 things to ensure the safety of one, because the safety of this unit is more important than most of the other stuff that's happening right now. Let's see what happens. As I have said, I win the duel. The Razor Dawn must retreat, or they will die. He thinks he can win the duel. The Lamassu thankfully comes back on and will allow me to win this trade, but I'm still low in the value because I lost so much health to it, and these 2 units will then basically like do a chain route, and this will all go in my favor. The other unit, as you can see, was already was coming back into this direction to help cover for this. It wasn't needed, so I switched its targeting again, but the plan was there to ensure that this Fireglaive could still be fighting. The caster is just being safe, getting the value it can without overextending itself. The magma cannon is safe. I know it's being shot, which is why I micro it a bit inside and a bit outside of the range of the Stegadon. Eventually it will get routed off, but it will have done its job in the meantime. As you can see, the value is stabilizing a lot. Let's review the power unit situation. Safe, I'm fine. Safe, I'm fine. Safe, I'm fine. Safe, I'm fine. Not that safe, but I can't really do anything about this, so I might as well get the value I want from them. Safe, it's fine. This unit is about to be a threat to my power units, because it can either do substantial damage to the Blazing Beards, or it can tie out the Infernal Guard. So what do? I use both of these units to ensure that the effect of this unit is as close to 0 as possible. Because again, that is the only thing that matters. The health of these units is the only thing that matters. Blazing Beards, they destroy another unit. This unit is amazing, I love them. The Fireglaives do their job, which is do like a Stormtrooper impression and do pew pew into these units and do very heavy damage. Oh, another threat has appeared to my Fireglaive, the Saurus Warriors. I can't allow these units to be damaged too much. So you can see now, I don't know if it happens right now or soon, let's see, but I divert several units worth of attention into helping the Fireglaives. Another thing, Magma Cannon, is it safe? No, it's wavering. This unit can make it route. I don't care about the health of this unit. I don't care about this one. This is important. So I summon another power unit that can quickly route a threat to power unit number 1. If you have a drinking game, when I say power okay units you drink, you're gonna die. I'm really sorry. But this will then allow me, the train will quickly route this unit and then go help power unit number 3, which is the Fireglaives, which is already helping what? The power unit number 1. Sorry, number 4. Not 1 was this one. You know, math is for elves. Doesn't matter. I am still down in value, by the way, but the resiliency and the, tricksiness of Chaos Dwarfs will prevail. Now, we have defeated one threat. Now we must take care of the second. Another thing. This game is about 3 points. With Chaos Dwarfs, you only ever care about 2. Only move on to the third if you are absolutely sure it is safe. Right now, I'm about to send 1 unit on Infernal Guard there because it's basically safe. I have routed most of its threats right now. One small parenthesis again. I have said before that Infernal Guards need a specific use to be used, right? You'd rather go warriors. I am testing them because the what's it called? These guys, the Red Crested Kings have very high melee attack, so I wanted to see if Infernal Guards could hold on a lot longer than warriors, and the testing has been quite good. They last quite a bit, but they need like that specific matchup that you're thinking about, in which they do substantially better than warriors if you want to bring them. Okay. Now, key unit compromised. This one key unit will go here and help. This key unit will go here and help. Other key unit is safe. Other key unit is safe, and what it's doing, protecting the first key unit. I now move to contest the third point. You may say, hey, this unit is an Infernal Guard unit. It's gonna way too deep into the enemy spawn. Correct. I could probably wait here. But in the sort of priority list of what I care about, this doesn't matter. This is time bought for my key units. I don't care about this. Or rather, I care about this once everything else, which is the health and position of all my key units, has already been established as being fine. Okay? I almost throw away my Lord because, you know, no comment. I dodge some spells because I'm amazing. And guess what? All of my key units are still online and doing their job from the beginning of the game. Yes, this unit has been somewhat, you know, damaged, but that's inevitable. I don't like it will. The important thing is it is online and it is fighting fit. And now the glorious gunpowder will keep going. Oh, threat to key unit. This threat has been dispatched, and now more units divert into helping the Blazing Beards. Do I need help? Like, do I care about helping this unit? No. Do I care about this unit? No. Or rather, I care because it's putting the enemy units in a position where I can shoot them. But if this unit becomes, I have no interest in the game plan in keeping this unit alive. I do have in keeping this unit alive. Therefore, rear charge from the goblins. Right? No, I messed up. Wrong. I meant to say rear charge on these guys. Then rear charge on the goblins. I'm not wrong. You're wrong. I sometimes make mistakes, as I said. Also, small thing. The Scar veterans are way undervalued. These guys do very interesting anti-large damage. They are not bad duelists, Laserman players. You can grow a second neuron if you learn this. Shastpuri taught this to me. See, the plan was there all along. I said I was going to go here, but instead I went here because I knew they were going to threaten this key unit. I didn't make a mistake. Are you believing me? Okay, thanks. You can now see that what I predicted at the beginning, even if the value doesn't say it, is now coming to pass. All of my power units have been free to do their job, and the battlefield is basically all of the leader stuff is routing. And even if my army has lost value in its, you know, if in its entirety, my power units gained me so much value that the result is a quite overwhelming Chaos Dwarfs victory so far. And my opponent played well, like he did the right things most of the time, but that's just how the race works. Or the stuff that it's supposed to leverage. Magma Cannon has finally fled, but another power unit has just entered the battlefield, which is the cool looking train, the Demon Stang, the powerhouse of the Chaos Dwarfs Forges. It's gonna seal the game up. Oh, threat to my power unit. 1, 2, 3, 4 units, and 5. I don't think it will matter, but 5 technically, will now converge to ensure the safety of the Infernal Guard. Also, we said why take Infernal Guard into the Lizardmen instead of Blunderbusses? Blunderbusses would still be good. I was testing if they do substantially more damage to the Shredder. The answer is they do, but not in this game, obviously. And now the enemy is way too tattered to mount any proper resistance. And the game is basically over. My power units will now basically ensure a chain route, and my opponent can't really do anything, as you can see. Like, nothing is going well for my opponent. And any loss I take right now is just the equivalent. The opponent takes an equivalent like 3 times as big. So I hope you have learned a couple of things, at least on how I approach Chaos Dwarves. And again, many people think about this stuff differently than I do, but this is my video, so who cares about them, right? I'm more beautiful than they are. You should care about what I think. I'm trying to think if there's something else we should talk about. What I said before, both centaurs are there to be a defensive unit, not an offensive unit. So I keep them between points as a somewhat quick response unit. I don't just force them here to attack the first cold ones just because it's an ideal target, okay? The triple cap has ensued and nothing more is to be done. I do make some mistakes here. I was getting tired. I should have protected my fire glaives better. But you can still see after we watch the values that I still do a pretty good job protecting them. Like, look, they do, like, they die, but they make the Lizardmen pay a huge toll for them. The enemy lord is about to die. The Lamassu, I think, was just a huge disappointment. Just in case you're curious. Let's look. So what were my power units? The Lord. The Lord did quite well. It paid for itself. The Blazing Beards. More than paid for itself. The Fire Glaives, the shooting. More than double its value. More than almost double its value. The Magma Cannon. 1.5 times its value. Also the leadership debuffs can't be, put into words, into money, I guess. The Granite Guard, kinda bad. The Trains, quite good, more than paid for itself. So I hope this video kind of piques your interest into this faction, which I think is very much still underexplored and perhaps a bit shunned by a bit portion of the community that I think doesn't understand its depths, a bit like Dwarves. But still, I hope this was useful. I hope you learned something, and we shall see you in the next Masterclass, which will be about Lizardmen. So Shaftesbury will have his revenge very soon. Bye, guys.